Thank you, Doug. Thank you. And just to you said you'd work for me. I viewed it as we worked together and did some great things together. So those were some good old days.
Thank you, my friend. Yes, good old days indeed. And so, Brian, thank you for joining us. Tell us a little bit about how you ended up in this business of CRM. Customer relationship management means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And the industrial and technical world is its own universe in many, many capacities. How did you end up focused on bringing CRM solutions to this marketplace?
No, you got it. I'll be quick here. I'll give you the high level overview. I always start off by saying, and again, I know this is maybe hopefully not I'll say this because I think I was an SOB. I start off.
I won't admit that you might still be, but then again, I am too, so it's all good. No, go for it.
I use the term SOB as I was the son of the boss. I grew up in an industrial sales company along the Gulf Coast. We were a distributor, rep, and service company servicing industrial equipment, process control, valve and valve automations at chemical plants, refineries, pulp and paper, oil and gas market. So I grew up through all phases of that, Doug, from sweeping floors in the warehouse to stocking shelves to inside sales to outside sales to product specialist and ultimately VP of sales. Now I'm gonna date myself here. This is in the late 80s and early 90s. In the early mid 90s, I'm a huge believer in sales process, and there was a solution out there called SFA. CRM was not even an acronym back then. SFA was Salesforce Automation, and so I'd implemented some manual processes to do lead management, opportunity management, project pursuit, target account management, white space analysis, all quote management, all this stuff. And I said I want to automate that. So long story short, we built a CRM system inside of the family business. Saw that it was successful and went out and raised money and left the family business and started a CRM company in 1998, 99. Stayed focused in the industrial marketplace, that Geico commercial, stay in your lane. We stayed in our lane. And about 9-10 years ago now, that company was sold, and now I'm strictly consulting companies on how to get ROI out of CRM through the CRM journey. So that's kind of hopefully not too long there, but connects the dots from the beginning to where we are now.
No, in fact, I really think what you've pointed out is that there are sort of three parts to the fire triangle of success here, and you've experienced all three. You've been the customer or the user, right? You've represented the user and you've tried to solve the problem from your own experience as a sales leader. You've been a software vendor trying to develop and deliver the technology to meet the client's needs. And you've been a consultant, coach, and advisor trying to ensure that teams take a healthy and strategic and productive approach to the success of these initiatives. So I don't know anybody in the industrial space. I don't know if I know anyone, period, who's worn all three hats. And I think, Brian, that probably really colors your perspective, having walked in those moccasins.
No, I appreciate it. I get asked a lot. People ask me, they say, do you miss being in the industrial sales world? And my comment is, I never left it. I'm just coming at it from a different angle.
Yes, absolutely. You're right. No, you didn't ever leave it. I think that's a really valuable point. So to that point, help us understand from your experience, what are some of the unique needs, challenges, priorities that make industrial sales organizations maybe struggle with, traditional CRM technology, or, need a certain kind of approach to achieve their success, whether that's the technology or the process or the people?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I guess I'm a little biased because I've been in this industrial market, but I do think there's some uniqueness to it. I mean, something I always say are check boxes that I go through are, are you selling, multiple products or services? Are they typically medium to long sales cycles? There are multiple influences on the sale. Are there multiple team members touching the customer from different roles in your company? So you start adding all this up and it becomes more complex. And so building a CRM system needs to build it such that it's kind of three-dimensional and can share and leverage information across all those different roles. And then you start talking about all your different manufacturers and the product taxonomies and the account hierarchies and segmentation and all the needs of an industrial sales company. It becomes complex. And so that's the challenge. And then I see a lot of other companies, the challenge of just putting CRM into a bucket and said, let's just go implement CRM. It's not easy. It's not easy at all. And you know that, and
Yep.
a lot of people on the call know that it's not easy. There's no easy button. What we've tried to do it within Sales Process 360 is help companies through that journey. And there's a journey, and there's steps that you need to take that we found as best practices to that journey.
You know, I'm going to add a couple of thoughts that sort of key off what you just shared. One unique reality, I don't know if I want to call it a challenge or not, but a reality in this business is because it is so sophisticated, it's engineering, it's technology, it's process, because it's so precise, the amount of knowledge you need to be a good domain expert in this field means that once you get into it, you're going to be doing it a long time. And so in my experience, you know, we're typically implementing CRM for sales professional sales teams where the average team member has been there 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And in a lot of cases, they're coming from even today, no CRM, or certainly no effective use of CRM in the organization.
Sure.
That's really important because the quick assumption that we try very hard not to make, but I know a lot of people do, is, well, how do you run your business without CRM? And the answer is on the knowledge and expertise inside, you know, between the two ears of the people.
Right.
You
Right.
know?
And but that's not shared and leveraged, and that's the key. And then
Exactly.
that's tribal knowledge that if you have turnover or people retire, where does that knowledge go? And how do you keep the
Yep.
momentum going within your company? And then how do you provide better customer experience with that tribal knowledge to the customer?
Absolutely, because anything that's only between the two ears of a particular individual contributor, like you said, you know, it's not an asset that the company has the moment that person leaves or, you know, retires or switches roles, goes part-time, changes anything. You know, the risk profile of these sales organizations is so high because 90% of the critical information is not part of a systematized environment.
Right.
And more power to you that you've got such capable, amazing superstars that are both, you know, great engineers or technical experts and at the same time great salespeople. We know how hard it is to develop a person who's good at just one of those things. But at the end of the day, it's a real existential reality. And, you know, I see a lot of sales organizations where it's, you know, in a 30-person sales organization, it's 20 people who are lifers and 10 newbies.
Right.
And, you know, those are totally disconnected.
Well, something you said when you said another thing that I'm a believer in is you must position this as a team solution. So, you know, like you said, you've got the superstars, salespeople out there maybe, and again, you've got to open up their blinders and say this is a team solution, and how can CRM bring value to them? But what's in it for me, right? And so you constantly have to be promoting that, but you also need to build a system with the processes and the expectations around that, such that everyone feels like they're getting something back from the system.
Yes.
Another thing that you said, something that sparked I boil it down to this. When I work with companies or we start having some engagement, I say, you know, let's focus on two things. If we can do these two things better than you're doing now, I believe it will give you a competitive edge. And those two things are better managing the front end of the sales cycle, that whole from lead to quote, that front end of the sales cycle, such that you're positioning yourself, your company, and your product for when a quote comes out, you're in the driver's seat. Let's manage that process, and that's in CRM's wheelhouse. And then the second thing is let's put in place a system to share and leverage information, that tribal knowledge across your team. That will give you a competitive edge and a better customer experience for your customers. So just those two things. I mean, this doesn't have to be that hard.
Right.
You know, what's hard is
Right.
the change management in CRM. I mean, CRM stands for customer relationship management, but I say a lot of times with clients that I'm working with, it's really change management. Until we make that change management, you're not going to have the success you're looking for.
Where have you seen in your practice some of the typical roadblocks or challenges that if we didn't have someone like you at the table, right?
Yeah.
If they just went through a traditional process with, let's say, an industry agnostic firm that was implementing their technology, where do these trip points usually arise in industrial sales organizations?
Yep. I'll start at the top, and I'll answer the question with a story, and I'll be brief. 6 or 7 years ago, I was with a company that was on CRM 2.0, meaning they were their second attempt at CRM.
Mm-hmm.
And they brought me in to conduct an audit or an assessment program that we put together, and to kind of boil up where the gaps are and where do we need to focus. So anyway, I was with them, with their team, with their key stakeholders, with their super users for 2 days. The president of the company was bringing me back to the hotel after we finished and we had dinner with the key managers. And he asked me one question. He said, Brian, you've been with us for 2 days. You're analyzing what we're on. Why are we on CRM 2.0? What's the one reason? And I know he wanted one answer. And so, thinking, Brian, come on, give a good answer here. All of a sudden, what popped in my head was the phrase, Steve, his name was Steve, I don't see who your CEO for CRM is within your company. And when I said that, Doug, you could see the light bulbs go off. We had a discussion on it, and I said, Steve, I just don't see. And to be successful, you have to have a CEO for CRM that's driving this initiative in the sales management role. And in his case, he had operations and IT kind of running this, which again, I'm not putting down the group, but they haven't lived the sales world, Right. And so they need to be involved in the project, but the driver needs to be as the CEO for CRM. So anyway, long story short, that I'm finding that was kind of like an aha moment for me as well. So much so that I bought the domain name for that night in the hotel, CEO for CRM, and I knew there was something there. And not to do a self-plug here, I guess I have a book coming out.
No, do a self-plug, please.
I have a book coming out titled that, Who's Your CEO for CRM Playbook, in about 3 months. So, allowing people to go, walk through the journey with me on what that journey looks like for that role to be successful. But to your question, I think the common denominator is companies need to have a true CEO for CRM that's driving this and promoting it. And it's a journey. It's a lot of steps in the process. It's not just signing the check to say, okay, we're going to implement CRM. It's managing the whole project, motivating the team, painting the picture, creating the stakeholders, making sure the check and balances are in place.
So let's dig into that. Let's talk about how the typical leadership structure of these projects is formulated. You've already alluded to some aspects of it. And then what makes this concept different, and who is typically the best candidate or an easy choice, but maybe not the best candidate to be appointed as the CEO for CRM?
Yeah. I mean, ideally, I think, and again, every company's different. I'm working with a client right now that we're going through that. And ideally, I mean, perfect world, it would be the sales manager. Now they've got a full lot on their plate to begin with, right? But the sales manager maybe can be that high level CEO for CRM, and then they bring people on the team that can execute and do some of the daily blocking and tackling. But there needs to be someone, and I think the best person is the VP of sales in that role, with a supporting cast based on the size of the company and the complexity and what's on there, how much bandwidth do they have. And then another key component of that is then what's so key is to get the key stakeholders from different management roles. If your company's set up by territory or business unit or region, getting some of those key stakeholders on the CRM bus, so to speak. And then probably, I think one of the most critical components is having what I call super users. Getting the super users involved early in the project, identifying those super users. And you alluded to something earlier about the tenure within a company. What I recommend is that a company looks at every role: inside sales, outside sales, marketing, customer service, product specialist, and ideally would have 2 super users from that role. One being a senior person and one being, a fairly new person, because they look at life differently and through different lenses, and they've got different perspectives. And so you build that super user group, and then you go through the journey. But those are some of the keys. Get your team organized, get your team assembled as the CEO for CRM, and then go through the process.
I'm kind of curious. This is a bit more of an IT-oriented question, but it relates to what you were just saying. When you talk about super users, one thing that I think about in terms of implementation strategy is, does that lean more toward an agile approach or toward like an early adopter or pilot group? Do you, in your experience, when you're working with implementations, which is obviously not all of your practice, but when you're implementing a new system, in your experience, do you generally recommend we do a pilot group first before we deploy to the whole organization? Or is that not really a driving factor, and it's more about identifying and maintaining those super users as kind of internal advocates, or is it both?
No, what I've seen lately, and again, I guess every company's different. That's the political answer, right? But what I've seen lately is that we assemble the super users. They're part of the whole journey. They're ultimately involved with the vendor selection. They're involved based on where you are in this journey. They're involved with the design. They're involved with the testing, which is key. So they're ahead of the curve, and they're part of the training process. So when we go out and train, we roll it out to the team. I just did an implementation of about 100 user client with 3 different offices beginning in December. And those super users were part of that whole training process. They had a role in the training and the rollout based on what we put as another thing I'm a believer in is a phased approach. I call it the 1 hand rule. We did do no more than 5 things each phase. And so they're part of that, and they're part of the training. And so this company, we rolled it out to everyone. We took a week, different offices, the super users were involved. We set the expectations for phase 1, and we trained on phase 1, and we got them up and running. And then the super users stay involved as kind of triaging the initial questions, and they're kind of like that lifeline, phone a friend.
Yes. So they serve as resources to their colleagues throughout the process. Yeah, absolutely. So I think what I heard was it's not so much about the phasing of the technical process. It's about identifying and maintaining those advocates. Maybe for some organizations, a true pilot phase makes sense. Others, It may not, but either way, you've got to identify those people and keep them motivated and moving in the right direction to bring others along.
Yeah, and again, I want to go back to, because it might have got lost in all this, is that I'm a big believer in, and have seen success with this, is don't try to do too much. So have a phased approach, and really keep focused on that phased approach, because as you start designing this, you'll want to expand that scope for phase 1. And I highly recommend that you try to maintain a very structured phase 1 approach that brings value, or what do they call it? MVP, minimal viable product, right? Have an MVP that brings value to everyone, but doesn't overwhelm everyone.
It's funny that you said that. One of the things that surprises a lot of people in the sales cycles that I'm in is the fact that I'm often pushing to downscope projects, because everyone assumes, because I run a VAR, right? My firm is a reseller and an implementation partner for a CRM technology. Geez, don't you want as much as possible in the contract? My answer is actually no, for a couple of reasons. One of which is I want the project to be successful. And when you throw too much in phase 1, you basically have already, loaded up the kitchen sink, and nobody knows which end is up. And all it takes is one single point of failure, and the whole project starts to go sideways.
Yeah. Yes. And then another key factor in this is, and I know you've dealt with it, just for the audience, is get your foundation right. Okay, and that's so important in starting a CRM journey, is get your foundation right. What do I mean by foundation? Getting your accounts and your sites and your sold tos and your hierarchy for accounts and segmentation and territories right. Get your product and service taxonomy right. Whether it's 2-level, 3-level, 4-level, how you want to slice and dice. Think of the end in mind with the reporting needs you're going to need. Get all of that foundational work, data governance, get all that right, such that when you're ready to go to phase 2, it's not major surgery, it's in outpatient,
Yes.
That's really and a lot of times they don't, and it's not their fault. They don't know what they don't know. So I think it's our job. I look at it as my job, and I think from your perspective, I know you probably look at it as your job when you're working with a client in the beginning, is to make sure they understand that the foundation needs to be right.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to add something to that I think ties right into what you're sharing. In one of our most successful client implementations, actually, one of the project leads spoke at HubSpot's annual conference last year, which is the Inbound conference in Boston, and they had 2 things. That they had the CEO for CRM, a senior vice president, and they had a project lead who actually had been in sales operations and then marketing operations, and now he's called the director of commercial tech stack. And the reason I like that is he has one job, and he's not in IT. He's not an IT guy. His job is to make sure that the technology is actually adding value. Sure. And he comes from the user's experience. So, we just met a couple days ago, and we were talking about how to make sure to add this is part of their next phase, how to add some steps in the process that guide the users through some of the more complex challenges that they have in their business. It wasn't an issue about the software. It was about, we're getting good feedback on the fundamentals, but the users would like more guidance in these couple of key areas just because it's a complex industry and they're growing very fast. So they're adding new salespeople who aren't from the, that particular sector. So now a lot of the focus is moving toward playbooks and in-app, contextual information and guidance, so that you're not in a situation where you're just staring at a screen trying to figure out what to do with it.
Well, so with that, another, trying to boil it down to simplicity, right? Remember I said the two things: focus on front end process management on the front end sales cycle and putting in place processes, share and leverage information. The other thing that I promote heavily is you've got to go through this journey of setting the expectations by role, training on the how, but more importantly, the why, and then monitoring. And it's a closed loop. And for each phase, you got to monitor that. And so when people understand their expectations and the why, I think it makes implementation and adoption so much easier, versus just here's some software, go input something. Well, what am I going to get out of it? Well, let's talk about the big picture. So anyway.
Let me ask you a question that comes up a lot when we're working on implementation planning and execution. During the sales cycle, for us as a seller, the client says, hey, we need to make sure the software, and in this case, I'm talking about a customer that has an existing system and maybe is migrating, which is very common right now. Well, we have to have it do all these things. And so we make sure that the new system meets all the requirements of the old system. But often about halfway through the implementation planning, they start to realize that just because that's the way they do it right now doesn't mean that's the way that they should do it.
Yep.
And there becomes, I would actually describe it as like a crisis of confidence in themselves, where they say, geez, we have you basically rebuilding what we had, granted newer wineskins, old wine, but maybe newer wineskins. But maybe we should rethink all this. The challenge for us is we still got to get the technology implemented. Right. So I'm curious, in your experience, how do you balance those two competing challenges?
Yeah. So, and that dovetails into something that I mentioned earlier that we do, and that is I highly recommend whether a company does it internally or whether they contract that out, or whatever, they need to go through an audit or an assessment process of understanding where their gaps are and what do they really want to focus on. And so if you're talking about a CRM 2.0 or a CRM 3.0, it's almost like they got to start from scratch again. Let's not just say we're going to do that because we've already done that. Let's step back, get the stakeholders and the super users by role involved, and understand where the gaps are and where do we really need to put process and focus CRM to bring value to the team. That then, because typically what you just said, people say all the time when they want a CRM system, what is it? Well, it needs to link with Outlook, and we got to be able to do this, and it's got to be able to export to Excel. Well, those are all features and functionality. That's not the process. The process comes out of the day in the life scripts. That's another thing I'm a huge believer in, is creating these day in the life scripts by role of what the user will do and how they're going to work with CRM. That becomes your guiding light for picking a vendor. That becomes your guiding light for building the data, building the system. That becomes your guiding light for testing the system. And that becomes your guiding light for training the users in the day in life. So I highly recommend get your arms around what do you really want to do with CRM. And if you're on 2.0 or 3.0, start from scratch. Start from scratch and look at it from a different perspective.
So I'm curious, you've got me sold. I'm excited about this. It is hard though to often make that argument in an organization. What are some of the key points that you make?
Hold on.
Oh, Brian's like, I don't know why it's so hard.
Well, you got to turn it around. And it's like, to the customer on a CRM 2.0, if you're happy, you're not going to be looking at CRM 2.0, right?
Right.
So like something's not right.
Right. How did we get to where we are now, where you're looking to do something totally new? Is that your point?
So it comes down to this. That's the job of CEO for CRM. I work with companies all the time, and one of the first questions I ask them are you ready for CRM? Because it's a disruptor. Okay. Are you ready for CRM? And if you're not happy with your current CRM, are you ready to change the behaviors and the processes and truly do a redo on this? Don't just change CRM vendors. And again, that's another thing. I see a lot of companies that I work with or talk to that are looking at CRM 2.0. They blame the CRM vendor. In most cases, it's not the CRM vendor that's at fault. It's the partner that they worked with, because most CRM companies work through VARs or partners. And so the partner is a valuable part of the success in this equation.
Yes. I'm not feeling the heat. Not at all.
I tell companies all the time, challenge your partner. Your partner needs to be evaluated probably more than the CRM vendor, because most CRMs today, if I go back when I started this journey of CRM in the 90s, there wasn't a lot of vendors out there. There's so many CRM vendors out there. It's not about, CRMs can do probably everything and more than what you want. Most companies are only using a fraction of what a CRM system can do. It's the processes, it's the selling of the system, it's making sure it's an MVP and brings value to the organization. And that's the partner's job, I believe, or I view that as my job if a company hires me or hires us, is to bring value or make sure the system is designed to bring value to the team.
So you had this conversation, and that led to this concept of the CEO for CRM. You've identified who should traditionally, in most cases, be that person. So if it's the VP of sales, what makes a lot of VPs of sales not automatically serve? Like, in other words, you have to still convince people,
Sure.
Hey, Frank, you're the VP of sales. When I say CEO for CRM, this is what I mean that maybe is not in your frame of mind today. Help us understand that journey. What's the difference between a VP of sales who's overseeing a team that's implementing a CRM versus that same person who gets it and is operating as your CEO for CRM?
Well, look, I think the common denominator there is they have to believe. Ted Lasso, right? I believe. You got to believe. They have to believe in this. And part of their job as CEO for CRM is to sell this to the team, to sell the vision, to sell the value, to sell how this is going to make every user more, put more money in their pocket, better customer experience. So they're constantly selling the why. And so some VPs of sales, they might say, okay, yeah, this is important. But if they don't believe, I know your sales team will see right through that. So they have to believe, and then you basically go through the process. I mean, we're talking about assembling the team and keeping people motivated and making sure that you're on track. And throughout that whole process, you're kind of coaching, you're kind of being the cheerleader through this and the leadership, the leadership for what CRM needs to be. But they have to believe, and if they don't believe, your team will see right through it.
And do you find, and I'm sure you do, I just want to delve into this a little bit, that there are organizations where the leadership, even though they've approved the project and they're nominally in charge of it, that they don't believe?
Yes, and it's, I have that discussion, and on the front end, as early as I feel that, I voice that to them. In some cases, maybe it's a decision. Let's put this on hold.
Right.
I don't want to go down this journey and being from my perspective, Doug, I don't want to. It's not in my best interest to be associated with a failure, right? So there's things that I've seen doing this for the years I've been doing it that I know that are common denominators for success. And if leadership doesn't believe, if leadership doesn't want to do change management for this and be promoting change, which is tough, I get it, and some companies aren't ready for it yet. I say don't do it. Put it on hold.
Right. There's no point in going through this huge effort if you're not going to hit that North Star and believe that you can hit the North Star.
Right. And but then just saying it and believing it, okay, now that's the start, and now it's tough. And again, there's a lot of steps from when you say yes, I want to do this, to when ultimately you rolled it out to the team and you're training the team. And it doesn't stop there. The CEO's role doesn't stop once the users have been trained. Now it's coaching them, it's monitoring them, it's keeping them moving forward and positioning your company for phase 2.
Yes, because this is a journey, not a destination.
I say it all the time. I use the word sprint. This isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. This journey is a marathon, and you got to be ready for that marathon. Now, what I also do see, I've seen this, where the CEO for CRM, maybe he's that VP of sales to get us through this whole project, right? To get us up and running. And then maybe the CEO for CRM that person backs off a little bit and then they maybe make CEOs for CRM within their company based on how their company's set up by branch or by territory or by business unit, where those become little, it's lack of a better word, focused CEOs for CRM in the way the company is organized.
Within that business unit or group,
Correct.
right?
Right. And the CEO for CRM still oversees that, but they're kind of on, for lack of a better word, they're in neutral on autopilot. They're monitoring all this, and now they have other leaders being the CEO for CRM for their particular region, business unit, or whatever.
And you're actually working with a client where the CEO for CRM function stretches across companies, manufacturer to their rep or distribution, network.
Yes. I just landed this project, and it's next time you see me, I won't have hair. But yeah, it's pretty complex, but it's level setting, where we are right now with that. And I come back to this, I think I made a statement. It's level setting everyone on the expectations. Once everyone understands the expectations and why, then we can start rolling this out. And there's no, I'm a believer in black and white, not gray, right? It's
right.
Here are the expectations, and let's train to that and let's monitor that. So what I'm finding with this company is that I'm working with is maybe those expectations weren't well laid out for all the different touch points. And they might have, when they look at the whole ecosystem, they might have 15 different touch points in different roles touching the customer and in CRM, so everyone's in CRM, but is the right hand know what the left hand's doing? And are we positioning it such that we can truly share and leverage this information in a standard format?
So let's talk about some of those formats. Let's talk about how we document, how we bake the CRM's role and processes into the organization. How do you design that? What does that look like? What form does it take? How do we ensure over the long term that, like you said, it goes back to that day in the life journey map, right? When I start my day, I use the CRM. Throughout my day, I use the CRM. What does it look like in terms of actually getting to that goal?
Yeah, well, that's part of the audit. Not only are you auditing and assessing the roles and their needs, you're also assessing the processes from lead management. How are leads managed? How are leads qualified to opportunities? How are opportunities worked? How are opportunities then teed up to quotes and RFQs and quotes? How are quotes followed up to orders? And again, it's a complete cycle, right? Because we're dealing with companies that are not a one and done. They're selling multiple products over and over to the same customer. So
right.
You've got to map that day in the life with regards to the sales process, not just the roles. And that's part of the day in the life scripts of managing that, right? So, it's going through, again, there's work involved in this. It's okay. Let's start at the beginning. I'm not going to go through all this, but what starts at the beginning? What qualifies a lead? A lead is a lead. Is it part of a source? Is it linked to a company or contact? Is it do you link it to products or services based on that taxonomy we talked about? And then what are the qualification processes? And then when do you serve that lead up, or when's it move from a lead to a qualified opportunity? What are your gates? What are your quality gates or your sales process gates for that? And then once it's an opportunity, now it becomes complex, right? And again, in this industrial world, as we said in the beginning, it's very complex, typically long sales cycles, medium long sales cycles. So you got to link all that stuff together. Then you said something a minute ago about how do you do the day in the life of? I'm a huge believer in homepage dashboards, homepage role-based dashboards. When a user logs into the CRM, there needs to be a homepage that's built for them that does two major things. Reinforces the expectations with the data and positions the data to drive action. It doesn't have to be harder than that. But role-based dashboards are so key.
So the user comes in when they start their day and they have certain information in front of them specific to their role that they can then action right away. Is that kind of
okay? Yeah. And again, so let's go through a normal fire drill, a normal day, right? They have all good intentions at first thing in the morning, whenever that is, to be proactive and manage what they need to manage, right?
Yes.
And then all of a sudden their phone rings, they're getting emails, urgent this, and now they're reactive, right? So that homepage
happened to me this morning at 10:37 a.m.
Right. So a homepage needs to allow them whenever they can to click a button and now get back to take a breath and let me look at what I need to do to make sure nothing slips through the cracks.
So that might be, let me look at, my strategic accounts that I haven't communicated with in more than, in the last week or two, my customers with current open orders that maybe have open shipping, so I need to make sure things
Sure.
are on track, my current opportunities, current accounts of a certain value, what are some of the other ways that you like to see clients organize that?
Yeah, I got stalled ops. I'm in the middle of designing some dashboards right now for a client. Stalled ops. Show me my opportunities that haven't been touched in 14 days or 30 days based on where they are in the sales cycle. This thing slipped through the cracks. Again, a week goes by like a day. A month goes by like a week. I mean,
Yes.
we are at the end of January right now. February is. I mean, what happened?
Right.
Right. So another thing that I'm a huge believer in is trending, because I think input trends on dashboards give visibility of how you're doing, and it allows a user to self-grade themselves. Example, if one of your expectations is to have one source of the truth for contacts and everyone's responsible for building the database with new contacts, let's trend the number of new contacts I put in the system so I can grade myself. If it's, leads, what are my lead trends? What are my new opportunity trends? What are my new project trends? What are my new quote trends? Those are all leading indicators off of each other. So I also believe a good widgets or elements on a dashboard or input trends. But those, and get your team involved in that. So get with the roles and say, what is the data? How do we serve up this data to make you a better salesperson, inside, outside, or product specialist, whatever? Now, in our back pocket, we know what probably good looks like, but get them involved in building that. But it's things you said. I mean, show me my ops by value. Show me my ops. Here's one I'm working right now with a client on. They sell a lot of different products or services. Okay. And another thing I believe is most companies only know you. I'm now talking with my distributor hat on. Only know you for a handful of products or services.
Absolutely.
Okay? We think they know our breadth of our product line, but they don't. Okay, so I'm chasing an opportunity. It's a sizable opportunity. Let's say it's a $100,000 opportunity for one of our products or services, valves. They need a lot of valves, or they need a lot of flow meters or pumps or whatever your product is, right? Well, I built a dashboard element that shows. Give me example. Show me the $100,000 and greater opportunities that only have one product on them. Okay.
Right. Yes.
So that brings to my attention. Wait a second. This is a big project. What else what are the ancillary products that I could sell on this, and puts it up right in front of you so you can take action on that to get the most wallet share you can get on these.
Yes. Just because we're working a deal doesn't mean we've identified or are pursuing the breadth of potential on that deal.
Yes. And so literally this morning, that was a spec for a dashboard element that I'm working with a client on that we're going to look at implementing. So.
Yep. And we're 100% services company, but the bottom line is we experience the same thing. Clients get to know us for one thing, and they don't realize that we can offer something else. And we need to think along those lines too. And actually, we're making changes in how we organize our products or services, and how we manage our own sales cycle to try to address exactly that. Because you get tunnel vision.
Yes.
Understandably. So I'm curious, why don't salespeople like or use CRM? What is it that just makes them go, oh, here's another one of these projects?
And I guess I could say this because I am or was. I spent many years as an industrial salesperson, right?
Right.
I think it kind of like, don't tell me how to do it. I know what I'm doing. I don't like to live in boundaries. I like to do what I need to do. That's why they're out in the field. They got freedom. But what needs to happen is, and it's hard sell. That's why it needs to be positioned, and I try to do it as early as possible, or suggest clients do this as early as possible, is promote it as a team solution. When they feel like they can get something back. So here's an example. Another big thing that I see a trend that I'd tell you the trend wasn't there years ago. It's becoming more popular, and I think it's valuable, and that is a 360 view of the business inside of CRM, where you're taking ERP data, sales data, or you're taking some quoting tool, external quoting tool, or whatever data source, and you're bringing it in CRM. So now it's not just CRM. So example, to your question. So building a dashboard, on one of the dashboard elements I have for an outside salesperson is my new orders today. Before, They didn't have good visibility of that. They might have got an email, and at the end of the month, they got some report that showed all the sales. Well, if we can
Right.
take that data from
Probably
an
a
ERP
PDF or
system,
some Excel spreadsheet. Right.
exactly. If we can
Static.
take that data from an ERP and put it in CRM and put it as a widget or element on their homepage, that they have instant visibility of that. Another one is working with a client that they had an external quoting tool. We integrated the quoting tool, the quotes, into CRM now, and so now the salesperson every day can see all new quotes that were done for their customers by their inside salespeople, all organized. So now they can get engaged with the inside salesperson and work with that quote. Work with what's going on. Make sure we're getting the most wallet share. Where before it was out of sight, out of mind, or it was put into an email with an attachment that got out of sight, out of mind, and wasn't really visible in their face.
Separate systems ultimately lead to separate cultures inside the same organization.
Oh, no question, no question. But from the, I'm gonna put my sales hat on, because I think CRM should be where I focus anyway, is on the sales pursuit side of the business, where if we can take other data points in the company and bring that into CRM, now you're starting to be able, in my opinion, sell the salesperson on, we're now serving up data for you to allow you to make better business decisions and putting data at your fingertips for the better customer experience. And another one is service. I work with a lot of companies that their service arm is totally off in the corner.
Right.
How do we get those service tickets from the service technicians into CRM? So now the salespeople, they're not blindsided when they walk into a facility that the service person was there last week or yesterday with a problem, and you never even knew about it.
Exactly. Yes. And so it's interesting that you brought that up. I'm gonna talk a little bit about HubSpot for a moment, but the reason is because I want to zero in on this issue and my experience with it. So in the industry, in the enterprise software industry, it's overwhelmingly common for companies to build their portfolio of products by buying other people's software, right? ERP vendor, Epicor has 17 different products. They were all acquired except for one, which was the one they originally built. Okay. And we see this over and over again. HubSpot, by contrast, has built a unified platform model. Now, sometimes that means it takes us longer to add a certain bell or whistle. I always say it's like, iPhone and Android. You can put any app you want on an Android, but half of them might brick your phone. Or you can take the Apple approach, and you might wait a little bit longer, but when it comes in, it's going to work flawlessly because it's on one unified platform. Ironically, though, I think that we've overestimated in the HubSpot ecosystem the ease with which customers, i.e. the companies that we're implementing, would adopt to the advantage of a unified system, because in most organizations, sales has a leader, marketing has a leader, service has a leader, operations has a leader. They all think their piece of the business should have its own special system. And so oftentimes, regardless of requirements, at the end of the day, everyone says, don't touch my stuff. I'm going to go get Zendesk for my department because that's what I think is best. It doesn't integrate with anything else, but my department's happy. And, the ERP decision ends up getting made without any regard to how well it integrates with other systems. Like, if you're not going to unify your organization around the customer journey, no amount of technology can overcome that.
No, you're right. And so a company has to believe in that and invest in that, because again, it's, they're going to get the best of breed, or what they think the best of breed is for each of those needs, from ERP to service to help desk or whatever. But there are ways, and I've been involved in ways. Is it easy? No, but it can be done. And I think it's becoming easier and easier by day with open APIs and all this integration stuff. And again, we're not talking full database sets. If we could just get the quote summary over.
Yes. Thank you.
What it does, giving the visibility to what? Spark conversation.
Yes. We don't need every piece of detail from all 27 tables in the ERP. We just need the right information in the CRM. Yes. No, you nailed it. And what I find fascinating is you made a point just a moment ago, which is about the value of having that data from other systems come back to the CRM. In my experience, what most large enterprises have sort of fallen into is what I call the BI trap. I'm not anti-BI. I want to explain what it's ended up becoming. So you end up with 7 different pieces of enterprise software running your end-to-end customer journey, right? And instead of properly moving data between them to answer questions, you just say, everybody dump everything into Power BI or Tableau or whatever BI tool we're going to use. And what you've basically done is you've now taken static information, throwing it all into one place and creating static reports and dashboards, because there's no interactivity with that information.
Well, and yes, and again, I just finished working with a client. It was a big project, SAP. They had SAP ERP and they went with SAP CRM, and they had what they call SAC, SAP Analytical Cloud, which is like Power BI, right? Now again, I'm as you, I'm not a downer on these third-party analytic tools that take multiple data sources. The thing that I though highly recommend is when you go down that road, make sure that if you're looking at data in those tools, that you can hyperlink and go take action. You know, and so we did that with this client on SAP. We did that because that was the requirement we put out there. We built the hooks with the hyperlinks in the SAC or Power BI portion to be able, because again, the last thing you want is a salesperson to see, here's a list of my overdue opportunities, but then I can't go do anything with it.
It's just like a PDF. It's like the old Crystal reports. You've just dumped the information. You might as well have little dot matrix, sheets feeding out.
So we made sure that the user, within whatever that is, BI, Power BI, SAC, or Tableau, that they could have that hyperlink to drive them right to the object form of that opportunity and go take action. Update the expected close date, update a new note, create a task, whatever you need to do to keep moving that up. But you needed to do it get there quickly.
Actionable.
Yes. Drive action.
Don't give me information. Give me actionable information and prioritize that information so I can act on it in the right order.
Exactly. And then now let's talk about the mobile experience. I mean, again, I don't know if that was, the whole mobile experience, I think, is so key in the adoption and success of an outside salesperson there on the road. So again, based on the screen size and everything else on the app, I mean, it's, can you tee up an opportunity? Yes. Can you change an expected close date? Yes. Can you do voice to text to update a log call? Yes. Can you use it before you walk into a facility to do a 360 view of what's been going on with that customer so you're armed and dangerous? Yes. So I think a strategy, companies need to make sure that they're addressing the mobile strategy within their implementation.
Absolutely. And to your point, the reason is because that's what users need.
That's right. And again, it comes back to your original question: how do we get over the hurdle of outside sales? Let's say, not wanting to jump into the CRM bus and take a ride.
Right. It kind of reminds me of the movie Up in the Air with George Clooney, where there's this scene where he's one of these guys who's on the road, 330 days or 340 days of the year. And he's told, hey, we're bringing everybody in. And the assumption is he'd be excited. And he's furious because it constrains his independence. And I think that's the same kind of psychological barrier we're creating when we don't get ahead of this with our sales teams.
Yeah. So that's why I go back to the very beginning of this conversation was assemble your stakeholders and your super users from each role. So one of the things I recommend from the super users for the outside sales is put a naysayer on that committee. Put someone that such that they can, if you can convert that naysayer, because everyone in the company knows that person who's not going to adopt to this, if you can get them in this journey early and get them converted to, you've won.
Yes. So what are the three things, let's say, that the CEO for CRM needs to have as their top, priorities? Like if they had a whiteboard in their office and this was their CRM whiteboard, what are the three things that need to be on that whiteboard that I'm focusing on every day?
Good question. I mean, there's a lot. Let me boil up three. You're putting me on the spot just like that Steve did when I was in his car saying, why are we doing this? I need an answer right now. I would say live and embrace the title.
Okay.
Live and embrace the title, CEO for CRM. Truly be that CEO for CRM. Believe in that. Believe you're going to have to convey this. You have to be a salesperson to your company on why we're doing this, because it's disruptive, it's change management, it's all of that. I don't know, be a coach, through this process. You're gonna have to coach people through this process. You're gonna have to coach your managers. You're gonna have to elevate your mid-level managers on this. Remember, I said a lot of times, I think what I've seen in some companies that I've worked with over the years on this, that CO for CRM gets the plane off the ground.
Right.
Okay. We're now at 30,000 feet. Now you can now turn on your whatever, right? Well, now
Yes.
when they're at 30,000 feet, they got this up and running. You're going to need to get your mid-level managers now acting as the CO for CRM for their particular business unit, branch, or territory. When you do that, again, I think you've crossed the chasm and you're well on your way. But again, there's no rocket science. There's no easy button, or it's not. Just believe in with this, live and embrace the title of the CO for CRM, so build up your mid-level managers to be believing in this, and then, paint the picture or make sure the company is marching in the right direction. But it's hard. This is hard. This is not easy.
It is. There are no shortcuts to success when you're trying to change an organization, add a new technology, and make people more effective in their roles, and do all that as one effort.
Well, I tell companies all the time, it's not going to be instant gratification. You're probably going to go backwards before you go forward.
Right.
And you need to understand that going in. But another thing is bring your team in early. Don't show up one day and say, come in for CRM training on Monday. On Friday, tell them to come in on Monday for CRM training. It's the first time they're really hearing about it. You've got to socialize. You've got to socialize this in the beginning stages. You've got to get your super users to be part of this. You've got to just build this momentum.
Well, so actually we've started to get some questions. And by the way, for those of you in the audience, feel free to type those questions in the in-call messages. So I've got a question for you from our audience, Brian. In these projects, often technical work dominates the budget and training gets short shrift. A, does that surprise you? And B, what do you do about it?
Yeah, and it doesn't surprise me. That's why it's important to understand going in what the real cost, not only cost for time, but cost for dollars on this is going to be. And it's like anything else. Anything that you you don't spend the money you need to for success, it's probably not going to be as successful as you want it to be.
Right.
Whatever project you're doing, it could be a house renovation project.
Right.
You've got a budget for this, and you've got to live through this. But what I would say there is, that's a tough one. It's a very tough one. It's a very tough one. I mean, I don't know if there's a easy answer for that, because something's going to be jeopardized. I would say minimize the technology, maybe downscale your phase one a little bit, but keep focus on the training side, because training is so important, and it's not a one and done. You've got to constantly train the team, have reinforcement sessions, and keep your team motivated. Plus you want your team to give you feedback through this journey. Something I say all the time. This is a key thing I think of. Something I say all the time to companies is setting the expectations. When I go out and do training, or we're getting ready to roll this out, I make the statement: CRM will not be perfect out of the box.
Right.
It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to hit all your needs, and that's okay. Because guess what? We want your feedback. We want your feedback to make it the best it can be 6 months, 12 months, 24 months down the road, because it's a journey.
Right. Right. A lot of clients, I think, as you recall earlier, I mentioned, where a client gets into the implementation, then they start realizing we should re-engineer our processes, and then they kind of freeze. Right. I think it's really important for clients to understand the implementation of phase one is not the be all end all. It is phase one. And that's not just technical phase one. Like, we'll get to that other technical stuff in phase two. You will continue to refine, optimize, and change the business case and structure of the system ongoing. I mean, our business of what we do and how we think about the best ways to run the sales process for that are changing easily every 18 months.
Yeah.
And we're constantly, revising how we use our own CRM and testing different ideas. Do we add more granularity to pipelines? Do we make them simpler? Do we have multiple pipelines or not? Do we add more automation? But sometimes the automation, I'll give you a quick example. We had an automation in our system that said whenever there's not a next meeting date recorded, automatically force the deal stage back to no next meeting and give it a 10% likelihood to close, right? But then we found out that there were some internal cultural issues with doing that in the organization. And so we actually turned off the automation, but we turned it into a warning and we gave a timing period. So like we didn't know that until we went down that road, and that's okay.
So you brought up something I wanted to, so giving that feedback. So another part of the equation is once you're up and running, you need to provide some feedback mechanism or conduit for users to give feedback. Not only questions of how to, bugs they might find or whatever, because again, you've tested it, but when you put it out in the masses, you're going to find stuff you didn't find, right? So anyway, long story short, with this client that I'm just working with right now, we put a web-based ticket system online for them to do, so we could use CRM. They didn't want to do that, but anyway, that's another story. But anyway, here's the story. About 30 days into this, we had about 120 tickets, different priorities, and we bucketized them by object or by dashboard or by technical issue or by mobile or whatever. We had one called enhancement, okay? Such that if a user thought of something that would make the system better. Do you know how many of the 120, how many were enhancements? 39.
Wow.
In a month.
Wow.
That tells me instantly, that, hey, they're thinking. And we want them to think. And I go back to my first thing I told them in the training was, CRM will not be perfect out of the box. That's okay. We want your feedback.
Yes.
So 39 out of 120 tickets were enhancement requests.
That's a sign of huge progress and huge success and engagement. Because if they're not engaged, if they're not adopting, they won't be engaged. If they're not engaged, they won't give you feedback and enhancement.
Exactly.
Wow, Brian, I know we've already hit 1 o'clock. I told you it would move quickly. It's been such a great honor, honestly, to spend this hour with you, Brian. Our association and friendship's gone for many, many years. And I want to say thank you to all of you for joining us. We've covered a lot of ground. I want to encourage everyone to please visit salesprocess360.com, which is the website for Brian's consultancy. And we will be continuing these conversations in the future. If you have any questions at all, please let us know. And Brian, again, thank you for taking time out.
Oh, I enjoyed it. It was like old home week. It was back to the good old days working together. So enjoy it.
Amen to that. Absolutely. Brian, thank you for being our CEO for CRM Expert. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.